You went to therapy because of heartbreak.
Yes.
I've been through heartbreak.
Who has not?
It's one of the worst feelings in the world. And it's really hard to give someone advice when they're going through heartbreak. I had a friend reach out to me recently and said, listen, I'm going through a heartbreak and I just don't know who else to turn to. It's this big, dark cloud that hangs over everything I do, think, and say that just won't go away. What have you come to learn about heartbreak from your own experience, but also from your patients? How do we navigate through that dark cloud?
I think what people don't understand about heartbreak is the grief. And so this is why I talk about it so much, and maybe you should talk to someone, because it's not just that you lost the present with that person. It's that you lost the future that you had created in your mind. So you're losing the dailiness. There's something really profound about the person you tell all the minutia of your day. The person you know so much about each other, and you know each other's habits and quirks. This, again, being understood, being truly known. It's such a delicious feeling, being truly known. And so this person knows like what kind of pizza you like, or this quirky habit you have, or what TV shows you watch, or that thing that you do with your eyes when you're excited. They know all those little seemingly trivial details that are so important about being known. And they know your history, and they know about your family, and they know who your friends are, and you've had shared experiences with this person. So you have all that history together. Even, by the way, if it was only 6 months, you have a lot together, or a year. And so in that time, you started to imagine, oh, and then this is going to happen next year. And then in 5 years, this will happen, or we're going to grow old together. Whatever you imagine will happen. And you become attached to their friends, and they attach to your friends. And then you lose the dailiness of being known. You lose the bigger circle that you had, and you lose the companionship. You lose the physical connection. You lose all of that, but you also lose this idea of what was to come. And so every day you're living in this future that is radically different from that day as it would have been if you were in that relationship. So it's very hard. People think, well, it's been this long. How come you're not over this person? It's kind of like the same thing when, someone has a breakup instead of a divorce. People think, well, it's not that big of a deal. Why? Why is it less of a big deal? It's still loss and grief. Or, it's like if someone loses a child, everyone surrounds them. There are all these rituals for how do we help people through that kind of loss. Someone has a miscarriage. People are like, well, you can still get pregnant again. At least you got pregnant, or the things. There's a chapter in the book called What Not to Say to a Dying Person, because one of the patients that I work with in the book is somebody who's a young person in her 30s who is newly married and then gets a cancer diagnosis. And people say the most well-meaning but ridiculous things to her. And so I think the same thing happens in heartbreak, where people try to minimize it. They try to cheer you up. They won't sit with you in your loss. And that's what you really need, is someone to sit with you in your loss and to acknowledge how profound the loss is. And people don't do that. They either don't see how profound it is, or they do, but they feel like, well, we don't want the person to wallow in it, or if I bring it up, they're going to be worse. No, what they need to be seen, and actually that's going to make them better, and it's going to make them heal faster.
What impact did it have on you?
The way people reacted, or
The heartbreak?
The heartbreak. I think for me, it was a big wake-up call, again, around this idea of half my life is over, and what do I want in my life? And why was I willing to overlook certain things in my relationship that were clearly there, but that I didn't want to see?
And how did you go about recovering? Is that the right word? Moving forward? How did you go about moving forward?
That's the whole narrative of the book. I went to therapy, and it's really about what I learned about myself in therapy that helped me heal and helped me move forward.
I was thinking about the advice that I could give to my friend and how I could have been a better support at, because my natural disposition is to try and fix. And from what you've said, that's not necessarily the best approach to take. Because my natural inclination is to go, tell them the future will be better.
Mm-hmm.
share my experience of my heartbreak.
And those are all good, because as a therapist, I want to hold hope for when somebody's really, really dealing with a difficult situation, whether it's a breakup or something else. I want to hold hope that they can't access. They can't access any hope at that point. So I'm going to hold the hope for them. But I'm not going to try to cheer them up. I'm just going to be the container for that hope so that they know that someone else is holding that hope. So you did two things really well. One was that you shared your experience so that this person knows this happens. This person isn't alone in this. Because I think when you go through a heartbreak, intellectually, you know other people have gone through it, but you feel like yours is so much worse than anybody else's. And so to know that you went through it too, and here's what helped you. And it also took time, and it sucked, and all of those things. And then I know that it will get better, even if you can't see it right now, to let them know that piece. I know it will get better for you, even if you can't see it right now. And the third, so those are the two things that went well. The third thing, though, is to be able to sit in the grief with them, to say, tell me about how things are different for you. Tell me what you miss. Tell me. And people think, oh, that's just going to stir up all the stuff. They're just going to ruminate. This isn't helpful. You need to give them a place where they can feel understood. And you can say one strategy that might be helpful is you can give yourself 30 minutes a day to go through all the things you miss, everything that sucks, how horrible it is. You get that 30 minutes so that the rest of the day they're not ruminating, because every time they catch themselves thinking about it, they say, wait a minute, at 6 o'clock, I get to do this nonstop for 30 minutes. And so if you can hold it, you rewire your nervous system. Neurologically, this actually happens, where that pathway gets interrupted. If we can put a stop sign up between the feeling and the behavior, which is the rumination. I feel sad. Oh, now I'm going to ruminate on this. We put a stop sign up and say, I get to go there later. Then later, when we start having more of these feelings, we have a stop sign that we're used to now. Now we're wired that way. So we put more time between the thought and the rumination.
On the point of heartbreak, at the deepest human level, is it about, you talked about the bigger picture, the loss of the future, et cetera, in the past. Is the fundamental reason we have heartbreak as a device built inside of us because we are creatures that need connection, and it's a mechanism to make us stay connected and avoid becoming disconnected?
You literally could not survive in early societies without being part of the group. You had to belong. If you did not belong, you couldn't survive. You wouldn't get food, you wouldn't get shelter, you wouldn't survive. So belonging is just hardwired in us. It's something that keeps us alive. And we actually do need it to stay alive. Even now. And what I mean by that is you take, for example, when they did these studies and they looked at babies who were in orphanages, and they thought all they need is they need food, they need to be fed, they need to be nourished, they need to have their diaper changed, they need those things. These babies didn't develop, and many of them died. It's called failure to thrive, because they weren't held. They weren't held. They needed love. They literally died from lack of love. They couldn't survive no matter how much they just stopped eating. Failure to thrive. They wouldn't meet their developmental milestones. This happens in really traumatic childhoods even. So you actually cannot live without love. You need some kind of love. It doesn't have to be romantic love, but you need love. So we need that. So our main goal in life is to love and be loved. We may think it's about success and it's about appearance and all the things that we see on social media. We may think that's what life is about and everything that our culture sells us. But ultimately, what we need is we need love. We need to love and we need to be loved. And so when that gets cut off, we forget that we have other people who love us. We forget everything else. Everything just feels extremely black or white. It's like I was loved and then I wasn't loved. And that's how it's going to feel for a little while.
It's scary. It's scary because so much of your work is centered on connection at like the fundamental level. And we're living in a world that feels like it's getting more and more disconnected than ever before. If you go back a couple of decades, young people used to see their friends once a week or twice a week. About 80% of people did. Now it's getting down to about 30, 40%, which is really, really crazy. I did a talk on stage the other day, and there was 600 people in the audience, and the kid sat to my far bottom left here, raised his hand, and his question in front of 600 people was essentially, I'm lonely, and how do I make friends? He sat in a room with 700 people that are his exact age, and he's asking me, in front of all of them, which
So
I
brave.
respect, he's asking me the question, how do I make friends? A lot of people ask that. A lot of men come up to me and whisper it to me at talks. They'll say it to me, so they'll make, because we film a lot, they'll come up really close to me and basically express that. They'll say it in my DMs, how do I make friends?
Yeah, I get that all the time, to the podcast, to the column. That is one of the most frequent questions is, I'm lonely. How do I make connections? How do I make friends? From younger people especially, but older people too. And I think that it's really frightening because when I watch my son, who's 18, people think, look, going back to your graph, that they are, quote, seeing their friends because they're sending pictures of themselves back and forth on Snapchat to their friends, and they think that that's socializing. But it's so different. We learned this during COVID, that there's such a difference between being in a room with someone and, being mediated by a screen. But they're not even having conversations like you would if you were with your friend. Things happen, you have shared experiences, you're doing things together, conversation just more naturally flows. They're literally, they're sending texts to each other that are just emojis or, a picture of this. They're not really learning. So it's not just how do I meet friends, but it's how do I be in friendship with someone? And it's hard because a lot of people aren't interested in doing that. Like if you said at that age, let's hang out, sometimes people will, but really more people are just on their phones 24/7 and they think they're super social, but they're not. It's like the difference between vulnerability online and true vulnerability. So a lot of people, in fact, I was just on Instagram and I saw somebody saying, I'm going to be so vulnerable. I see this all the time. I'm going to be so vulnerable with all of you and share this thing. And all their followers say, that was so brave and lots of heart emojis and all of that. That's not vulnerability. To put that out on a public platform, true vulnerability is what this kid was asking you, which is, when you are face to face with someone, if you're with your partner or a close friend or a family member, and you want to share something you need in the relationship or something that you feel shame about or something that is scary for you to take the mask off and share with somebody, that's true vulnerability because the stakes are high. What is this person going to think of me? Again, going back to I need to be loved. We all need to be loved. What is this person going to think of me? How will they love me if they know the truth of who I am, this thing that I'm about to share? Very different from sharing it on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So I think that it's really important that we as adults look at how much FaceTime do we have, FaceTime in-person time, do we have with people? Are we really prioritizing that? And are we modeling that for the next generation?
What would you have said to him? Because what I ended up saying to him, because it really took me off guard, no one had asked me that, obviously, in front of a huge group of people. I said to him, what you've just done, do more of that. And what I meant by that is he had been so vulnerable and open, and I've come to learn that vulnerability in and of itself is a magnet, not a repellent that we think it is. So I said, do more of that. But I thought maybe that's not the best possible answer I could have given him.
I love that answer. That's a great answer. I also might have said, I want everybody in this room to turn to the person on your right and introduce yourself to them and ask them about one thing that they want you to know about them, because that's how you're going to start making friends.
We don't do that anymore.
But we can. You see, there's simple things. It's not like, people say, it feels so overwhelming. How do I make friends? And they think they're going to have to learn all these tactics and techniques when really it's just about be curious. Ask someone about themselves. And the people who are receptive to that, they might become your friends. People who aren't, I'm not really interested in them. Doesn't really matter.